It was the largest Christmas gift I had ever seen. I had just walked into my grandma's house for Christmas, and all children do, I ran straight to the Christmas tree, and I started reading tags, looking for my name. But I couldn't help but notice that the back was the largest Christmas gift I'd ever seen. This is not like when you go fishing. This truly was the largest Christmas gift that I had ever seen. Don't be offended by that. It was a good joke. I was proud of that one. Anyways, but like our tradition happened, we had to eat first. So all the kids are very anxious as we eat. You're eating way too fast, and the parents go, well, we should do dessert, obviously. And they took their time. You know what I'm saying? Like, way too long drawing that out. So then we finally get to the present time. Finally. And we sit down, and of course I want to start, whose is this? There's not even a tag on it, so we don't even know whose present this is, but we're going to wait. Of course, we're going to wait on that present. So we get going on all the gifts, and finally, an aunt of mine looks at my brother and I and says, this gift is for you. And I'll tell you, I hardly remember what was in that box, but I do remember that it was mine, okay? It was large, and I got to open it. It's very exciting. What I wanted to do this morning is I wanted to have a large gift and a small gift and bring a child up and say, choose one. But then the box would be empty. I thought that could go poorly. But also, what if they chose the small one? What if it just backfired on me? Because there's something about the way we assign value, especially when we're young. We're just looking for the size of the gift, right? And as you get older, you do the same thing, but now it's kind of in the inverse. That if you look under your tree this Christmas and you see a large gift, unless it holds a car, you're probably like, no thanks, I want the small gift, because the small one could have jewelry, a watch, or something like that in it, If it's too big, you're like, no thank you, I don't have room for that in my house. Whatever it is, I don't need it. Whatever it is, we do this, not only with the gifts under our tree, but we have this value system that we bring into the world. And when it comes to our gifts, it's about the size of the present or something like that. And we continually weigh things based on our human, worldly values. But thankfully, God has a different set of values. And he brings to the world, and he brings to our life. And so I want to talk more about that today. If you have your Bible, turn over to Micah chapter 5. We'll be there in just a minute. I want to welcome you to Crosspoint this morning. My name is Kale. If you didn't recognize me because my shirt is tucked in and I have this jacket on, it's still me. Thank you for asking. This is not my dad's. It is my jacket. But we are excited to celebrate Christmas with you. Now, if you are a traditional person, Christmas doesn't actually start until Christmas Day, the 25th. That is when the 12 days of Christmas begin, just like the song. I asked Kyle if we could sing it. He said no. So here we are. But rather, right now is what we call Advent. It's this time when we are kind of in this in-between time. You and I recognize that Christ has been born. And yet we are still celebrating that and longing for his return. We're in an in-between time. Advent is for a time of waiting. It's a time of expectation. It calls us to something deeper than our culture calls us to, with the Christmas lights and Hallmark movies and carols. But Advent, the true nature of Advent puts us into this tension of acknowledging what is right now and staking our hope and our faith on what is to come. And so we wait for this coming king. And so the prophets are a great place to do that. And so we've been in the prophets this entire series, and they are writing or speaking out to the people of Israel who are caught in this in-between time. And they're caught in a very difficult time. Micah is no different. He writes during the time of 3 different kings of Israel and Judah, but most prominently is King Hezekiah, which you've probably heard of before. Micah writes in a long enough time that he sees Israel fall, and he's in Judah as the Assyrians keep marching onto them as well. It's not a good time. He has some hopeful things to say, but it's a very difficult time. He has this this pattern in his letter, his book, that is a time of distress and then deliverance. And all of them will start with the word now and now. And so we're going to read one of those in just a minute. This is, again, as I said, a very difficult time. The Assyrians are coming. And it starts in Micah chapter 5, verse 1. We read this: "Marshal your troops now, city of troops, for a siege is laid against us. They will strike Israel's ruler on the cheek with a rod." So what has happened is Israel has fallen, and now the Assyrians, which will become the Babylonians, that's a story of it itself, but they are laying siege to the city of Jerusalem, and they've taken Hezekiah captive. And this, they struck him with the rod, is a way of saying they have disrespected him, they have dishonored him, they have humiliated him. So now, imagine you are in Jerusalem, and this is how bad it is. This is what you see coming. So much so that Hezekiah saw it coming, and he built what's called Hezekiah's tunnel. And you can go, when you go to Jerusalem, you can walk through this. And this is one of the wider sections of the tunnel that I was able to turn and take a picture. Most of it you can't really turn around. It's built for one person to walk through at a time. You walk through water the whole time. I have a headlamp on, or else it would be completely dark, of course. Imagine the situation that you see coming, that you say, let's build a tunnel under the city. You know what is coming, and you know you can't win. That there is almost no escape. You cannot stand up against the Assyrians. And so you build a tunnel underneath Jerusalem. I don't know how long it took to build the tunnel. I don't know what it was like, but I know that you have to be in a certain kind of distress to do that, to dedicate that many man-hours, to have that prepared. And so the city has been laid siege. They're surrounded. The king has been held captive. There is no hope. What do you do? So we're going to read part of Micah chapter 5 right now. And it's going to sound a lot like Christmas to you. That you are going to be able to read it. And as you do it, you're going to be able to make a conclusion about what it means and who it's pointing to. But I don't want you to forget who it was originally written to. Don't forget the situation they find themselves in. Because this is written to a certain people at a certain time. And the prophets, Micah is no different. The prophets help us look to a new future. Verse 2 of Micah chapter 5. "But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Therefore Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor bears a son, and the rest of his brothers return to join the Israelites. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, and the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth, and he will be our peace." If this sounds like Jesus to you, it should. We're Christians, and we read this after the fact, and so it sounds like Jesus to us. They will be looking forward to a new king, to a new ruler. And so what the writer here, what Micah says is, point your eyes to Bethlehem Ephrathah. Now, to be clear, there are two Bethlehems in ancient times. And so he wants to be very clear of which one we're talking about. We're talking about the city of David. We're talking about the smaller one. Don't misunderstand who we're thinking about here. In fact, if you go back to the book of Ruth, you would read in it that the family of Elimelech and Naomi are described as Ephrathites from Bethlehem. So Micah is not being subtle. He wants you to know who exactly we are talking about. About 10 years ago, there were a bunch of cities bidding to host the Olympics. And it was every city that sounds normal, the cities that bid on Olympics. Paris, Los Angeles, I think it was like Munich, Germany, Rome, Italy, even Boston. But if you read in there, this was for the 2024 Olympics, which of course was given to Paris. If you read in there, you would read Los Angeles, Paris, Rome, and Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, my grandparents have always lived in Tulsa my whole life. It's a great city. I don't mean any slander to the city, but one of these is not like the other, right? That as you go forward, you're like, people didn't think it was serious, but it was a serious bid. But it didn't make sense. It wasn't the right kind of city. And that's a little bit like what's happening here. No, there is one coming, and he's going to be from Bethlehem. And you go, well, that's not really where rulers live. That's not where they come from. Yeah, we know David came from there. We get it. But David didn't end up there. David established Jerusalem. David left. And so why are we going back to that? But even in Micah chapter 3, it describes Jerusalem as the royal city with its magnificent buildings, versus what we read now about Bethlehem, which is essentially a country village. It's little among the clans of Judah. It's small. It's not the right place. In fact, even the writer here in Micah chapter 5 uses a word to describe. We read, it shall come forth from there. But it is a very unique Hebrew word that's used exactly one time other than this. And it's used in relationship to David. It is directly linked. And so Micah, again, is not being subtle. What we're talking about here is David's lineage. We're looking at David's dynasty and who will finally come and be the ruler once more. They should expect a new David. And so, yet, for all of this imagery, and I've said it a couple times, and I apologize, but in this passage, you do not hear the word king used. In fact, in Micah, the author is very careful to try to use the word ruler instead. If you remember back, God did not want his people to have a king. He said, you should be different than the cities, the nations around you. Because essentially God is saying, you already have a king. I am your king. And so Micah is looking back to another place, to another time, when God will again ascend the throne. When God will sit on the throne, there is no need for any other king. Micah is looking forward to a new future. And so what they see is they see the Assyrians bearing down on them. And God said there is a shepherd coming who will bring peace. He doesn't bring military might, but he's a shepherd for the flock, for the people of God. And so what we see here in Micah is we see a very common biblical theme. And this common theme is that God, all throughout history, has chosen the least likely, the smallest, the littlest, the vulnerable for his own purposes. That God does not go to the powerful, to the many, to the big. He goes to the small. Just a few examples this morning. When God calls his chosen nation, he calls a couple without kids. Abraham and Sarah. When God chooses his king, finally, he goes to Bethlehem, and he goes to a family, who, the family, by the way, in their lineage of note is Ruth, the Moabite. That David's, great-grandmother is a foreigner. This is the vulnerable. This is the unexpected. And when they call David, they gather the family there, but he's not there. Because why would you want the youngest sibling? He's out in the fields. He's of no use to you. When Gideon is called in God's army through Gideon, it's 10,000 is too many. Let's whittle it down to 300 because we don't need the large. But the small will do just fine. And even as Leighton described so well for us earlier, when Mary is called, Mary is nobody. She's not from a family of note. She's not married yet. She's not the right person. And then, of course, this theme throughout the Bible finds its climactic expression in the person of Jesus. The Messiah, the Savior of the world, is found as a baby lying in a manger. Jesus. And does it sound familiar to you when we read Micah? It should. Matthew chapter 2 reads like this. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel." This is clearly inspired by the prophets, clearly inspired by Micah, that Christ has come into the world. Love has become incarnated in Emmanuel, in Jesus. And he's come in an unexpected place, in an unexpected time. For this is hundreds of years after Micah, when one empire after another has dominated the people of God. Jesus enters the world not as a triumphant ruler, but as a vulnerable baby. See, you and I fall into the same mistakes that the people in Micah's day did. When we think about power, when we think about value, we are always looking with the world's eyes. We look to the important, to the rich, to those with political power. Micah, meanwhile, is jumping up and down and saying, "Stop fixing your eyes there and look over here to the unexpected place." I think God is still doing that today. While we so easily fall into the same predictable patterns of looking to power and might with the world's value system, God is still working in small ways and pointing us in other places. See, we declare every single week that we know that God is faithful to show up. That when we declare what God's promises are, we believe that they will be true. But the how isn't always to our expectations. In fact, in this very room, we would find stories of people who said, "This is what I asked for, but God went a different way. I thought this is what the best plan for my life was, but God had a different idea." And almost always you will find, "And it was better." That God's plan for my life, though maybe unexpected, that the way God showed up was not what I thought it would be, it was better. Just like Micah's original audience, we are caught up in an uncertain world full of violence, and we long for a different time, for a different world. We want that peace that will come through the person of Jesus. And so today, our reminder is to look for God's presence in surprising places, where we least expect it. God has always used the small, the weak, the powerless, the vulnerable. Do you have eyes to see? Do you have eyes to see how God has been at work in your life? Are you prepared for the King to come in this manner? To come in the unexpected way? You've heard me use this quote before. I apologize that I really like it, but it's very impactful. Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. I think always, even the faithful in this room, we want to do those great things. We want to go on the mission trip. We want to give a large sum of money. We want to do something so sacrificial when God is consistently calling us to be faithful in the small ways. To do the consistent, the everyday, the ordinary. That we can be like God and act in these small ways around us. And so this week I was thinking about what are ways that we can live this out. And so I went to ChatGPT, as you do. And true story, I went and I said, "Generate a list of 20 everyday acts of kindness that anybody can do." And some were good and some were not so good. But here are my five favorites. Write a note of encouragement to someone. Donate clothes, books, toys to a local charity. Bring a meal to a neighbor or coworker or friend or fellow church member. Volunteer to babysit, to help someone with errands, which as someone who still has young kids, but when they were really small, do you know how life-changing it would be if you just said to a mom in this audience, a dad too, I suppose, but said, "Hey, for a couple hours this week, I want to come sit with your kids so you can go get some stuff done." That would be really helpful, I'm just telling you. My kids are older. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about, so. Of course, you can pick up trash in your neighborhood local park. These are good ways that you can act for the good of those around you. Easy ways. Nothing on that list. It costs you very little in terms of money. It costs you some time and some effort. That's a good list, but I did come up with another list. Pray for one another and follow up. My guess is that this morning, somebody that's sitting here right now said to somebody else, I'll be praying for you. Well, what if instead of just saying it, what if you did it, and what if you followed up in a few days? What if you said, I have been praying for you. What else can I do for you? How else can I show up for you? Be patient and kind to one another. Some of us in here would rather go on a foreign mission trip where we camp outside than be patient with your family this week on Christmas. You know what I'm saying? Oftentimes, if you're like me who struggles with patience, we feel like it should just kind of come natural, that when it gets hard, we say, well, I tried. It's when it gets hard is when you're supposed to be acting with patience, you know? This week, maybe it's the week to start learning how to be patient with one another. Forgive each other. People will hurt you in this life, intentionally and unintentionally. And you have no control over what they do with it, whether they make amends or not. But what you can do is you can forgive as you have been forgiven. And this one I think is especially important, especially in a time like Christmas. You can bear one another's burdens. That very often what we want to do is we want to greet somebody else at church or somewhere else, and we want to say, that sounds really hard what you're going through. That sounds very difficult. I will pray for you. But then we want to walk away and do our own thing. And we want to say that's their burden to bear. But what Scripture tells us, commands us to, is to bear one another's burdens. Is to jump into it with them, jump into the fire with them, and to say, I am here with you every step of the way. How can I bear that burden with you? All of these are examples of what it means to love one another. That love has come into the world. And Jesus says, they will know my disciples by this, that they love one another. There is only one way that the world will know you are his follower. That's whether or not you love each other. Whether or not in a busy season like this, that we start to think about our families, our events, our things, that we look to the other next to us. God can use you for a big impact in this world if you are willing, but it has always been in the small ways. It has always been in the consistent, everyday actions of ordinary people. God showed this himself when he did not come in a big, spectacular way, but he came in the form of the baby, vulnerable, lying in a manger, in a far-off town where there was no room for him or his parents. God continues to show up in these small ways, and he's inviting you to act in the same manner. In fact, take heart in this today, church, that God continues to show up in small and big ways for you in your life. Maybe you've gone to the theater to see it this holiday season, but there is, in the movie theater right now, the best Christmas pageant ever. Or maybe you've read the book, or maybe you've seen the live play, I don't know. But it tells an awesome story of a town that always puts on the Christmas pageant, and it looks the same every single year. The same kids play the same parts, and it's all neat and buttoned up. Until this year. This year, they have a new director who doesn't know how to do all the things the right way. In fact, she allows a new cast to take part. And their name is the Herdmans. And they're the wrong people. They have the wrong parents. They're from the wrong part of the city. They don't even know the Christmas story. So it's the story of this family portraying the Christmas story and learning about its goodness all along the way. And so because of that, the entire church, the entire town sees the story as if for the first time. And it's the best Christmas pageant, the best Christmas ever. And it came from an unexpected place. It didn't go to plan. It wasn't how it was supposed to be. I think that's how God continues to show up, and he continues to use us. Though oftentimes we're the wrong people from an unexpected place. The plan doesn't go as it should every single time. But God, this year, wants to use you in all of those small, everyday, consistent ways. As we close, our shepherds and their wives will be around the room. We want to invite you to pray with them today. This may be the best Christmas season you've ever had. This also might be, for others of us, one of the more difficult Christmas seasons that you have. We're not a perfect church, but we long to be that church that will love you as Christ has loved us. That we want to be there for you. And so this may be the place where you need to start. As we close today, we remember that unto us a child has been born. And because of that, everything has changed. Let's stand and sing.